where you're playing with your concepts of time illusion, right?
Yep.
So currently you're shifting back and forth in your numerous areas of your so-called belt, yes? And thereby creating confusion for yourself. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I was just thinking like how good it must be for you guys not to have to worry about this bullshit.
Well, it's not we all have to worry about bovine feces, it's more the idea we're transcended this concept. It's not so much that we have to think when exactly does this person at this particular juncture of what you can say like time or space want to do their whatever, right? Instead, we tune to a frequency when whatever we're currently anticipating is about to happen. Now, you are literally doing the same thing. It's just because you're having the illusion of timing. You cannot be pulled somewhere automatically and be where you're supposed to be at the right what you consider time, because you recommend your idea of time structuring by such a measurement, right? If you were always more what you consider perhaps your gut instinct that would just act upon that, you would always be where it's supposed to be at the right what you consider time. So it's not so much the idea that then you would always be at the point when you are supposed to be in originally. It's more you have to experience you're most inclined to have any continuous interaction, no matter what so-called time it currently is. But where your fear center of the concept of when you're, for example, late for work, etc., right? Or for any appointment or a date, yes? Or early for that matter, and you hasten to get somewhere, or if you would literally not fare any bovine feces, yes, in this regard, and be neutral about whatever outcome there might be, and you allow yourself to be where you're supposed to be, everything will be more succinct. Yes, we're structured, we have hierarchy and order, but we have designed them in a fashion that's more adaptable to our advanced understanding of nuclear time, which ultimately is just another dimensional layer to your experience. So things are automatically more smooth and effective. But feel free to keep your plans in order of what you considering certain time frame, interaction, zones, whatever, if that's what's floating your planet currently. Just remember, you are the one who are creating all of those things quite literally. There is no hour during a day, there is no summer or winter time, it's just something you made up.
So do we have the option of, I don't know, like consciously doing something to get out of the time frame dimension? I mean, how do we, like you say, it's just an illusion. How do we like teach ourselves that it's just an illusion and like, you know, to get out of this dimension or whatever?
We just did. We taught you. It's an illusion. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's an illusion, but still, like, I'm stuck here. It's not like I can just, I don't know, travel like a year or whatever in the future. Can I? I don't know. It's just confusing to me.
Well, your idea of the future is an illusion, so you can't travel to the future because it doesn't exist. It's just another version of the now. So whatever you imagine the future to be, right? That's now.
Okay.
You're already in the future. At least in what you understand to be the future, right? Send me your idea what happened 100 years ago, yes? You probably have a lot of preconceived notions of what happened then, correct? Including your so-called study of history or whatever, right? Including historical documents, right? All of those things give you an idea of what happened. But in reality, your idea of what happened is in the now. There is no past, it's now. Your idea of what the past is, it's existing in your now. Right?
Right. So let's say, for example, if there's a movie that I really want to see, which comes out in like 6 months or whatever, I mean, how, like, can I just say, oh, it's an illusion? I can shift myself to where the movie comes out right now?
Yes, sir. The movie will be exactly what you perceive it to be, right?
Okay. It still doesn't I'm still not getting it. I mean, how do we? I don't know. Yeah, like I understand it's an illusion, but that doesn't like help us much.
Well, it's not supposed to help you. It's just a real fact. Like the theory of gravity doesn't help you. It's just there.
Right.
Use it or don't. Use it or abuse it, whatever. It's just there. Same way time is there in your idea of interpreting reality. Yes, that's all it is. It's just interpretation. And there are parts of you that's not willing to believe that you can just go see this movie now because it's not out yet. And because of this assumption, it's not there yet. And you can wait however much long you want for it to come out, or you could literally watch it now. But of course, if you decide to watch it now, you will become aware that the entire movie is just a figment of your imagination, so to speak, or rather your perception of it creates the movie in the first place. The way you perceive the movie or anything else, yes, is the way you project your consciousness outside of yourself. And if you would accept that, you probably wouldn't care about this bloody movie, because you realize your entire world around you, the way you perceive it currently, is nothing but a movie. It's real. Alright?
Right.
Now, your so-called special day, in terms of this being a day on a particular time, right, is what it is, because of the decision of your own peoples or those that ordered you at the structure to keep this day, that you're formulating your own calendar, the concept of this being a recurrent theme, which then sends out a frequency that you've made it so. Now, as mentioned previously in your own called time, for us it's an adjustment of frequency, not something that passes linearly. So, timelines don't exist, at least not in that manner. Just like coloration does not exist. It's a reflection back on your own eyes for what you're sending out. Therefore, you perceive certain elements to have coloration, when in reality it's just your perception making it appear as coloration. Your scientists agree on this. Yes? However, it's not just coloration is everything. Everything more or less just the way you perceive it only exists in your perception, including time, including timelines. There are no timelines. Every single what you consider a second, every single moment, every fracture of existence is an entirely different one. And they don't exist necessarily one after the other. They all exist simultaneously. And now the probability to have certain moments in what you call a timeline align with the other to form such an event, such an experience of being on such a timeline, is simply an assumption, right? Just like you assume, well, I'm expecting mail today, so there's probably going to somebody ring my door and deliver a package. That's the expectancy. You have more likely this going to happen. The same way you can be on a timeline where, well, this country just declared war with another country, so likely we're going to have a fight happening on this borderline between those two countries, right? That's something to be very physically expected on a timeline. The same way certain beings can read timelines, certain prophets, etc., can read by simply an expectancy. The same way the weather can be forecasted, not because somebody literally knows what will happen, because nothing will happen at all, because it's already happening. But what is most likely in alignment with what you're currently sending out. You have something like brainstorming, right? The idea where you're drawing the idea of a certain thought on a certain board, and then certain other concepts or ideas you connect to it, right? Closing items, for example, if there's a term, then there would be a pants, a shirt, etc., right? Thoughts, those things are the first that come up, the idea of being connected to the general main topic of closing items or a brainstorming idea. The same way of your now moment. Like other all now moments, they are now. Now, around this, there are many other infinite options of what the next now moment will be in your perception of what you consider an experience of time. Any of them is possible, literally any. You're currently on Earth, eating breakfast or dinner, whatever, and the next second you're on your planet Uranus freezing your ass off. Unlikely, but possible. Now for your conscious mind not to completely lose it, right, so you can just the physical, then the next most likely moment that you will associate the brainstorming idea, realistically, will be obviously finishing breakfast and put your plane away. So therefore, this is much more likely to happen. But theoretically, it's just as likely to end up on Uranus freezing a reservoir of nowhere. But of course, just in theory, as in physicality, your mind wouldn't cope with that. Besides, if someone would happen that to them, they'd likely die in Uranus. You never hear of them again, so that's why this never happened. No one ever told you so because they haven't died on Uranus. But more seriously, your next moments don't exist in terms of time, because again, time isn't real, therefore timelines cannot possibly be real. It's just an association in your brain. Just like we started this interaction a few moments ago in your own understanding of time, but in reality, you could say we've been traveling, so to speak, through a vessel for several years now. Constantly. It's just that you perceive there to be time between our interactions that you consider sessions or events or because that way you need to perceive something in a time of frame. But for us, it's one ongoing experience. You just hop in and out of our experience, and therefore, we're all part of this what you consider a timeline. We're beyond time. And again, we're there, individual in your species still don't completely understand this concept. You will once you get beyond time. You can't see the forest for all the trees simply. Or believe you have an Asian side of a particular planet, the idea that you can't see the river as long as you're still swimming in the river. You have to swim out of the river first and look at it flowing by and you realize you weren't just in water, you were in one particular river. Now, the same goes for timeline. Once you hop timelines, you shift timelines, which is bullshit. It never happens, right? Not that you're in the stream of bovine feces, more an idea, a concept, it's simply not accurate. Timelines aren't existing. So therefore you can't shift from one timeline to a next timeline. It's impossible. However, what you can have is the experience of being in another timeline, because simply you have another brainstorming idea. Suddenly, instead of thinking of socks and shirts first, you suddenly think of a jacket. Or you think of a clothing item first, so therefore now you're in another association brainstorming idea, therefore you have another experience of what you consider timelines. You are on another timeline, but actuality, you simply have another association. Therefore, a version of other people, or other people entirely, or perhaps you have a mood swing, right? Now you're a female in your species, when you're a certain period, quite literally, right? You might experience much to a greater degree, or of course, but anybody in your species can easily induce when you're digesting certain plant matter that highly increases your affectionality, right? Your entire species is constantly suffering from mood swings as far as we are perceiving such, so perhaps it's not something you consider that abnormal, and for us it certainly is. When you suddenly see the world through completely different eyes, nothing changed, but you see it differently. So therefore you suddenly live in a different world. That's perhaps the most akin that we can use in terms of a point of reference that everybody literally can understand, so it's an abstract concept of what a timeline shift would be, right? And you can't really understand the theoretical concept of timelines unless you're talking about shifts. If you only consider one timeline, one perception of time, you call it timeline, you can't really understand what they are, because again, it's the concept of being in the forest and not seeing the forest for all the trees. Now, when you apparently have shifted a timeline, all you've done is have a different perception, just like you're perhaps saying, well, you have to sleep a night over it, then you'll see it differently, right? This particular saying from your word. Now, when you're doing such, of course, the world doesn't change, but your perception of it changes, therefore what the word means to you, therefore also the word and the way you live in it has indeed changed, because you are on a new timeline. Obviously, again, every single moment is new, so therefore there are no timelines, but that's the way you can perceive it more consciously without going in a psychological frenzy trying to grasp the concepts beyond your current perception.
I mean, I know you said like we don't really shift, but like say for example, I wanted to experience, like I wanted to go to Atlantis or I wanted to go see the Tower of Babel. Is there anything I could consciously do to like to go to that timeline or whatever you would call it?
First and foremost, you need to believe and be convinced of beliefs that it's possible, right? But you currently don't. Now, it's much more likely to perceive it, but then again, you're talking about Atlantis or Babylon if there is only one version of it in one particular moment. But there are infinite moments of those two particular cultures in what you consider your past, which isn't real. So it depends which version would you like to get you into. The fact that you even have this version in your mind, you think of certain buildings or certain insular structure, right? That's already you're tuning into this particular timeline compared to if you would physically travel down there or to the Bermuda Triangle perhaps and absorb a source and observe what's currently going on there. Currently, again, just your perception. And the very fact that you have to determine your mind, certain ideas, is you're tuning into this particular timeline as much as you possibly currently can. At some point, you can get so overwhelmed by it that you feel like perhaps you consider in your dream state currently when you are mostly going beyond time for what you currently are able to because you're shift dimensionalities then, you will almost sense as if you were there. And the more you're convinced that you are really there, the more you will be, because that's all it is. You're currently also experiencing your current lifetime in your current locality because you're convinced that it is real. But in the end, it is just as real as your dream.
Okay, so you're saying if I wanted to visit Atlantis, I just need to convince myself that I'm in Atlantis?
You are literally in Atlantis just like you are where you currently are right now. And you can't convince yourself, you have to be convinced first. You can't convince yourself, you have to be convinced on your own already. We're just correcting your wording here, but essentially you're correct.
Okay, but like, is there any, like, I know with the like the Bermuda Triangle, it can like shift you to another timeline or whatever it's called. So like, is there a way to like for somebody to build some kind of machine to, you know, shift somebody to another timeline without them having to, you know, be convinced or whatever that they're just shifting?
Well, the machine would then just create what you are otherwise doing anyway. So yes, it's very possible that the person constructing the machine using the machine would still have to get in that state, right? There's no workaround, no simple trick. But yes, indeed, there is a certain opening in your Bermuda Triangle where you can shift to a perhaps parallel or higher dimensionality, and from the higher dimensionality, you can choose different timelines once you are there. So yes, if you would travel to the Bermuda Triangle and find the right spot, so to speak, that could happen. But yet you would like not appear in a different timeline, you would appear beyond time and can choose a timeline, but since you're unable to fully comprehend what that entails, you would likely end up somewhere else. Like your Philadelphia project, right?
Right. Now, do you like? Are you familiar with the Back to the Future movies? Like, has David ever seen those?
At least one. We're having some concepts from the idea of cars, flying, etc. Yes, it's like what you're referring to.
Okay, yeah. Well, like basically, like in the first movie, like the main character, he goes back in time and like he basically screws his well, like he prevents his parents from meeting each other. So that kind of like in the year that he's normally from, it prevents him from being born. So it's kind of like the movie starts in 1985. He goes back to 1955, and in 1955 he starts to like disappear because it's like he screwed up his own existence. Like would something like that happen in reality? Like if I were to go like 30 years back in time and prevent my parents from ever meeting each other, like would I cease to exist, or would it just be like I don't know? Would there be different timelines? I don't know. I'll let you explain it.
Again, there are no timelines. And there are infinite versions of your parents, an infinite version of what they experience. So you simply can alter your perception of what your current past is. There are a version of your parents that never met and a version that was never born. So you cannot possibly not exist in the version you are born. You can just identify with a different version that doesn't exist, but by the timeline that you would choose to be an experience began, you would choose, because timelines aren't real, you just create, you choose to identify with a certain timeline where you don't currently are incarnated, which of course would result then in you being disincarnated. But still you would be incarnated, just a different version of who you currently are.
Okay. Whenever we had this session like a week ago in Earth time, like I mean, I know like time didn't pass for you, but like you I mean, like, what happened for you, like, between that time and now? I mean, was it just like a blink of an eye, like no time at all passed, or what?
The blink of an eye is time passing.
Yeah,
You
I know.
could stretch the blink of an eye in slow motion, so to speak, and then you would still have a process of time occurring, even if it is a short process of time. That's not how dimension works. It is more the idea that I'm beyond what you understand as time. So from your concept of it, it is more like I shifted to another frequency. So from your perspective, it could be years ahead in the future when you talk again to me, or years ahead or behind in the past, or just another moment as I shift from one frequency to the next, depending on where you are coming from. So very often from people on Earth that are asking from their own vantage point, yes, from their own frequency, they reach me in my point in what you call time that is most conducive and conductive to their energy, which usually is the same when they're asking unless they have made a huge shift in their frequency, which can happen over the process of, for example, 20, 30, 40 years of your counting, but not because time has passed in your world, but because you changed in your understanding of frequency, because time does not exist for you either. You just perceive it that fashion. Now, if another person asks, they might talk to a different version of me that is much older or much younger or just slightly different, just a few minutes or hours, depends where they're coming from. And if entirely different people with a different frequency would ask me something, if they do it from your counting tomorrow or in 10 years, doesn't matter. But what frequency they are in matters, considering which version of me will give them an answer.
Okay, I understand a tiny bit of that. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it again. But like, are
You
you
will understand it better once you shift your own frequency to another level, to another what you consider dimension.
okay? But I mean, are you still sitting in the same place, for example, as whenever I talked to you a week ago, in terms of my time?
Well, very often I am in the same place and I talk to individual because there is a certain room, so to speak, that is conducive. Well, what I'm finding in David's mind is a scene from a movie you call the X-Men, from what I'm aware of. And there's one character who sits in a certain room that is supposed to enhance his telepathic abilities with a bald head.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's not like that, but it's perhaps good for you as a metaphor to imagine what I'm using in order to send out frequency in terms of the vicinity that I'm located in. It doesn't look exactly like that, but the principle, the idea behind the movie makers perhaps has been to represent something that is similar to what I'm using. On the other hand, I can do it from other places, so I'm not always the same spot. But since you're often asking me certain questions or ideas in the vein of history, for example, there's a similar frequency, and usually I am seated then in this particular point.
Okay.
You said if the fear is just pushed down, it will eventually still manifest. You cannot completely annihilate it. So like, I mean, that kind of like made me think that like the whole idea of overcoming fear is like completely pointless because like if we overcome it, then like it'll just like manifest somewhere else. Or like maybe I misunderstood you. Like the word you used was if it's just pushed down, it'll manifest somewhere else. So like, I mean, what did you mean by that? Like if we like if somebody like overcomes their fear of like extraterrestrials, then like will that fear just manifest somewhere else?
Everything exists simultaneously everywhere all the time, so somebody else might have that fear then. Or you might be afraid of something else instead of extraterrestrials. But
Okay,
nonetheless, you're still learning a lesson and you're evolving.
so is it a good thing to overcome our fears, or should we just say, oh well, there's no point because if I overcome my fear of this, then it's just going to crop up somewhere else?
But also the possibility if you forget about the possibility of overcoming your fear and you have your attitude, it doesn't matter, then you likely have already overcome it, ironically, otherwise you would not be able to have this neutral offhand approach to begin with, you would be more triggered.
Okay. All right. Well, like another topic now. So like, yeah, I know that there's a, we all have like infinite timelines for how our life goes, but like, I mean, do we have to live, do we have to live through every single possible timeline? I mean, it seems like 80 years is a long time to have to live through like one life. And it's, if we have to live through it again, where like, a timeline is slightly different and then live through it again where, the timeline is slightly different, like that would be like super annoying, it seems like. So, I mean, for my incarnation as Ryan, like, do I just does my higher self just, I don't know, like, do I experience just one? Do I just experience it once, or like do I have to keep reincarnating so that I experience, a trillion different timelines?
First and foremost, a previous question, the idea being you don't overcome fear by avoiding it, by loving it, by approaching it with love. Maybe that's a better phrase and understanding of you to solve it, not so much you suppress it or try to avoid it, if that makes it a little clearer. And now to this inquiry, there is no time, so all of those lives that you're referring to are happening simultaneously. It's not like you once go through your life and then you have to go back and do it again from your conscious state. It is already happening all simultaneously, and the identification that you have with who you truly currently are is already separate from all the other experiences, and there is another version of you right now in this moment already experiencing the other options and possibilities, understanding and seeing everything from his perspective, which in a way is also yours. It is not like you have to go back and do it from your own current ego perspective over again, a different function. It happens by nature.
So, but like, why? I mean, I felt like we incarnated to learn life lessons. So it seems like there's no point in living. Like, if every possibility is happening, like, let's say we were just talking about fear. Like, let's say there's something really scary, and like, in one timeline, like I overcome that fear, and then the other timeline I don't overcome it. Well, it's like my higher self isn't learning any lessons if both are happening at the same time. So it's like, what's the point of living? I mean, I don't know, it just seems like really pointless to me if everything is happening at once. Like, we're not learning any lessons because everything is happening.
Everything is happening beyond time. But your incarnation itself is the learning lesson, and it would not be happening if you were not partaking in it. Your oversoul wouldn't learn anything if you did not incarnate. So the fact that it is happening anyway is part and parcel of it. You are happening anyway. You are existing anyway. You are part of the whole process. It wouldn't work the same without you.
Okay. But like the version of me that's like talking to you at this very moment, like, why am I it's hard to put this into words, what I'm asking, but like, why am I experiencing this exact timeline right now rather than like tuning into and like seeing and experiencing another timeline?
Because one aspect of your oversoul had to, and that's the one you're currently identifying with.
But why am I currently identifying with this one instead of another one? I don't know. It's hard. It's just really confusing. It's hard to, I don't know. It's hard to put into words.
All the choices and all the options that you take currently and all the things that you consider real. If you would change one of them, you would no longer be this Ryan, but another one, but you would identify then with the other one and therefore think this is just as real, but your future and past would also alter, and so you couldn't tell any difference from your ego mind because it would feel the same.
Okay,